When Charlotte's husband, John, died, he left a painting that she thought was valuable, but the experts who checked the painting said it was worthless. This mystery set Charlotte on a thrilling chase for the truth. It was a secret message hidden in the painting that would change Charlotte's entire life. This led her to discover that the man she loved wasn't entirely truthful with her. 50 blissful years. Charlotte and John did not have the perfect marriage, but it was a happy one just the same. They had their share of problems but solved them together and were passionate about sticking with each other until the end. They had 2 amazing kids and spent 50 years together, creating priceless memories. But John suddenly passed away, leaving Charlotte deeply heartbroken. John had been her partner for the past 50 years. How would she continue without him by her side? John and his secrets. Charlotte fell in love with John for all the right reasons. She was thrilled to be married to this fine man. Life would have been perfect, but it always bothered her that John never talked about his family. John also had a few quirky traits that Charlotte could not understand, and he was very quiet and withdrawn. Charlotte hoped that John would eventually be more open to her about his past, but despite their 50 years of marriage, he remained suspiciously private. Behaving suspiciously. John behaved suspiciously, and Charlotte forced herself to deal with her concerns. For example, sometimes he'd come back from work very late and not offer Charlotte any explanation, nor would he have called beforehand to explain why he'd be arriving home later than usual. Each time Charlotte asked him where he'd been, he'd avoid the question. Without giving any direct answer, he reassured her that his lateness was not her concern. He assured Charlotte that he was not with anyone else and would never do anything to hurt her. A mysterious locked press. John's suspicious late nights were not the only thing Charlotte had to deal with. She also noticed a cupboard inside their bedroom that was always locked. It had always been there, and because of John's secretive nature, Charlotte knew he probably wouldn't tell her what was in it. Charlotte tried to open the mysterious cupboard a few times, but was never successful. Eventually, she decided to wait for John to tell her when he was ready, but she had doubts that he'd ever be ready to reveal his secrets. Preparing ahead of time. John's death did not surprise the rest of the family, probably because of his age and health. It was something that they had been anticipating for some time. Because of this, everyone assured they were there for John during his last few days. They could all say their goodbyes and made John feel their love for him. What they didn't know was that John had also been secretly preparing for his passing. He made sure everything was in place, and soon they would find out the story behind his secrets. A priceless gift. John's succession plan seemed straightforward at first. He left Charlotte a painting that he claimed was extremely valuable and made her promise never to give it away to anyone. He also told her to make sure to look a bit more closely at the painting. Charlotte couldn't understand why John spent his last moments with her fussing about a painting. She thought it was odd that he would insist on her promising to do this one task when she only wanted to say goodbye to her husband properly. The mysterious painting. After John passed, Charlotte was devastated and grieved deeply. Her children comforted her and checked on her regularly, but she felt so alone. After living with someone for 50 years, she had difficulty figuring out how to move on. The only thing that kept Charlotte distracting from the hurt was the painting John had left her. It was indeed mysterious how much John valued this painting when it didn't even look especially valuable. Deciphering John's message. Charlotte continued to glance at the painting daily as she recalled how intent John was in making her promise that she'd do so. But the truth was, looking at the painting often made Charlotte feel more sad and alone. She wondered why John didn't tell her the importance of the painting. He had always been so secretive. Why didn't he just trust her with the truth? Charlotte had always assumed that as he came close to his last few days, he would reveal his secrets, but he passed away without telling her anything. Looking at the painting more closely, one day, Charlotte decided that if this painting was really that important and valuable, she'd listen to her husband and take a closer look. She also thought that just maybe, in her 50 years of putting up with all his secrets, this painting could help her understand her husband's mind even better. She stood up and walked over to the painting. She took a closer look at it and studied every single inch of it. John's last request for her to look more closely at the painting kept echoing in her mind. A new mission. By now, Charlotte knew that sitting around and feeling sorry for herself was not going to get her anywhere. It seemed that the painting was the answer to all of the mysteries surrounding John for the past 50 years. This realization gave her a new mission to understand everything about the painting John left her. So Charlotte took the painting off the wall and carefully packed it. She knew that to solve the riddle, she had to talk to some experts. Puzzling results. Charlotte decided to bring the painting to an art assessor. She wanted to know what kind of value this painting had, but the expert gave her some puzzling results. The painting was actually worthless. Charlotte asked the art assessor to look more closely, but the person said nothing about the painting gave it any additional value. This left Charlotte more confused than ever. Getting a second opinion, Charlotte's friend, Tony, dabbled in art restoration. So she called him up and explained the situation. Tony immediately agreed to help, so Charlotte brought the painting to Tony's house. Upon initial inspection, Tony agreed that the art assessor's findings were true. However, Tony also knew John, and he admitted that things didn't add up. He knew that John wouldn't be the type who would fuss over a painting and insist on its value if it wasn't valuable. Looking at all the possibilities, Tony had known John for years and knew there was much more behind John's request for Charlotte to look at the painting. He promised to do everything he could to help Charlotte get to the bottom of the mystery. Tony also knew that it was with his dying breath that John requested Charlotte to take a closer look at the painting. So Tony recognized that this was something not to be taken lightly. So he took a much closer look at the painting to start piecing together this strange puzzle. A weird coat of paint and varnish. Tony's weird experience as an art restorer showed him a few weird things about the painting that the art assessor had noticed. For example, the coat of varnish was unusually thick and the layer of paint underneath it was also oddly thick. He also noticed that the brush strokes were not normal. He probed even more and found more inconsistencies under the lens of his microscope. Tony decided that merely looking was not enough. Something hiding beneath. Upon closer inspection, Tony noticed areas underneath the paint that seemed thicker than others. Using a special blue torchlight, he examined those areas and determined that there was definitely something else beneath the paint. Finally, Tony called Charlotte to show her his discovery. She came into the rope room and watched as he broke through the thick layers of varnish and paint. Once Tony was done, they both saw a small piece of paper and gasped in surprise. Charlotte was dumbstruck by the discovery, especially when she saw her name on it. It was, without a doubt, her husband's handwriting. A familiar address. With her hand shaking, Charlotte took the piece of paper and read it. On the back, she saw an address that seemed familiar, along with a numbered code. She realized that the address was that of a local bank. Her heart racing, Charlotte thanked Tony for this amazing discovery. She ran to her car and drove to the bank. Mixed emotions. Charlotte tried her best to calm herself down as she drove, but she couldn't stop the wave of emotions coming over her. She was extremely happy that she was finally discovering bits and pieces of her husband's secrets. But at the same time, she also felt a little angry. Why had he been so secretive? Hadn't he trusted Charlotte enough? Why did he take her through this whole ordeal just to understand the message? Charlotte finally reached the bank and quickly approached an employee for help. She showed him the code on the note. Wide-eyed, the bank employee quickly asked her to follow him into a more secure room. She was so scared at first, thinking that she was in trouble, but then the employee went out of his way to make her feel like a VIP, and Charlotte felt even more anxious than ever. She was eventually led to a big safe in the middle of an inner marble wall room. Another letter. She noticed a scanner by the safe and a silver plate with her husband's name engraved on it. The employee asked her to press her finger on the scanner and the light turned green. When the door to the safe opened, she saw a note, a thicker one this time with her name on it. She knew that this letter would hold the answers she had sought all these years. She was finally about to discover her husband's biggest secrets. Again, she recognized her late husband's handwriting. With tears starting to flow from her eyes, she asked the employee if she could have some privacy so that she could read the letter. The employee willingly obliged. Charlotte went from page to page. This was one of the sweetest letters John had ever written to her. It also revealed every single secret that he had kept from her all these years. Finally, she knew the truth. Living a second life. John was a carpenter, so Charlotte was shocked that there was a huge fortune inside the safe. Apparently, John lived a second life and had another job that Charlotte didn't know about. John also mentioned a rich uncle who was a famous painter when he was still alive, but did not give any other details about him. Charlotte assumed that the uncle's paintings had been sold, but that wasn't the case. Heir to a fortune. As it turns out, John's uncle left the entire estate to him, including a huge collection of very valuable paintings. So John's late nights would involve auctioning off his uncle's art for substantial sums. The fortune in the vault was a mix of John's inheritance and the money he got for selling his uncle's artwork. He also offered Charlotte a very good explanation of why he decided to keep all of this from Charlotte and their kids. Chasing Bliss. In the long letter, John explained that he had been raised by his uncle, who had raised him as his own and gave him a lavish life. But because the older man was so wealthy, John saw how people used his uncle and manipulated him. John vowed early on that he didn't want this kind of life for his own family. He wanted genuine, loving relationships that had depth. He wanted his kids to live in peace and with genuine happiness that wasn't based on material things. Finally, Charlotte understood. John did it all for his love of their family. Wasn't this such a sweet story? Oh, tearjerker, guys. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll see ya on the next Trendy Matter video.